But what I want to talk today is more what happens to a human being who lives in a war environment. The changes that we've seen our son go through, it's very difficult. You know, our son, of 4 children, had the biggest heart of our 4 kids. He was always giving. He wanted, in his future, he wanted to have a child care center because he was always really good with kids. And he thought that this way, getting the $20,000 bonus would be a way to getting there and so forth. But when he went to boot camp, we started noticing some changes in him. When he graduated from boot camp, he invited us, and when we went there to Georgia, he was already acting different. He was being pumped up with all his other comrades there in Fort Benning. He went back to Iraq, and he finished his first tour. When he came back, it was about a year ago. We noticed that he was already changed also. His wife didn't really recognize him, the things that he was going through, but he started drinking a lot. He started having nightmares. He started having flashbacks. And he understood what his situation was, but he told us, you know, the only way I can sleep at night is if I get drunk. Last Thanksgiving, he came home for Thanksgiving here in California, and our whole family, we have a huge family, went over there to, you know, make him sure that he felt home again. After we got home to our house, he went out and wanted to go out with his friends. They went out drinking. And right about 1 o'clock, our other kids woke us up and says, "You gotta come out, you gotta come out there." Gabriel's outside, and we go outside, and he's on the ground. He had a flashback where his friends told us that they went outward to get a cigarette and light the igniter. The flame came up and he lost it at that point. He thought he was back in Iraq. You know, he threw himself on the ground. He was trying to contact his supervisor. You know, and what do you do as a parent when you see your son in this situation?
The invasion started slowly. We were just driving for days. First Iraqis we saw were Bedouins in the south. They posed no threat and looked at us like we were from another planet, so we just waved and drove on. My unit's first contact was as we were providing security as the rest of our regiment moved northward through a small town. I was in a mortar platoon, and we were getting ready to fire on a building that was firing at our convoy. Understand, of course, that mortars fire almost 3 miles, so most of our targets are called in by others and we never see them. So when we started hearing small arms fire very close by, it surprised us. I thought it was one of our own guys firing. Then I heard a ricochet in the vehicle I was standing in. Turned out I was being shot at because I was wearing a radio, like an idiot, standing in the bed of a Humvee a good 5 feet higher than anyone else. So we all scrambled to a berm to identify where we're pretty sure the fire was coming from, and we tasked the machine gunner with taking out the shooter. The machine gun is a 30-pound beast that no one ever wants to carry, so of course it gets assigned to the youngest, newest Marine in the platoon. So now this 18-year-old kid is told to fire an M240 Golf medium machine gun at a rate of 650 rounds per minute into the window of an adobe building that we're pretty sure was firing at us. No one ever went to check if we were right. Congratulations and machismo abound, of course, because he got some. Same day, maybe a day or two later, we're traveling down a stretch of road dubbed the Highway of Death. We'd gotten the word that there would be absolutely no civilians in the area. They'd been evacuated or told to stay indoors or whatever. And we believed it. Our convoy would rotate battalions on point. So some days we'd be out in front, some days we'd be buried in the middle, and this is one of the days we're in the middle. So someone else was up front hitting targets as they were identified. At the very front was a group of Humvees with tow missile launchers on their roofs, a very powerful weapon. Well, we're cruising along and we see a white bus blown up, smoking on the side of the road. We also must have been jihadists or something, until we pass it and we see it's full of families who are trying to escape the town. There's a little girl and her father, and she's dragging a suitcase, and it's blown apart and her clothes are scattered all about, and she's smoldering with her father dead. I'm sure it was a very simple mistake somewhere along the way, but the end result was that a bus of civilians was blown up. The first day we got into Baghdad, April 8th, we responded to a call for immediate suppression. It basically means someone is under fire and needs immediate artillery or mortar support. Over the course of a few hours or so, we blanketed a city block. It was a few apartment buildings with hundreds of 81mm mortar shells, each with a blast radius of 30 meters. We heard later there were dozens of Iraqi casualties. We all knew that the civilian body count was high, but didn't spend any time thinking about it at the time.
As military families, we find ourselves fighting many battlefronts at home, never knowing where the next battle will be. Many times it comes from friendly fire. My eldest son did 2 tours in Iraq, including the siege of Fallujah, where he was hit by a mortar. When he came home, he attempted suicide many times. He would call me to talk to me, for me to talk him out of pulling the trigger as he had the gun in his mouth. He felt the only option he had was to kill himself. It was the only honorable thing he could do. I promised him his voice would be heard in the halls of Congress and that he would not have to go and to not lose hope. I delivered a poem, just a simple poem that he had written. I delivered it to every member of Congress and every senator. I'd like to share that. My son wrote this, and it's entitled, Why I Fight for Peace. Because I can't forget, no matter how hard I try, they told us we were taking out advancing Iraqi forces. But when we went to check out the bodies, there were nothing but women and children desperately fleeing their homes because they wanted to get out of the city before we attacked in the morning. Because my little brother, who was my job to protect, decided to join the California National Guard to get some money for college, and they promised he wouldn't go to Iraq. Instead, 3 months after enlisting, he was sent to Iraq for a year. Since he's been home for the last 6 months, he refuses to talk to anyone. He lives by himself. The only person he associates with is the one other man out of his squad of 13 men who made it home alive. He called me a few weeks ago for the first time and told me he's having nightmares. I asked what they were about, and he said they were about picking up the pieces of his fellow soldiers after a car bomb hit them. Because every single one of the Marines I served with, the really brave warriors, even when some friends and people they looked up to got killed or lost arms and legs, they wouldn't cry, they just kept fighting, they completed their mission. Every one of them I've spoken to since we got home have broken down crying in front of me, saying all they can do since they got back is bounce from job to job, drink and drug, and contemplate suicide to end the pain. Because I'm tired of drinking, bouncing from job to job, and contemplating suicide to end the pain. Because every time I see a child, I think of the thousands I've slaughtered. Because every time I see a young soldier, I think of the thousands Bush has slaughtered. Because every time I look in the mirror, I see a casualty of the war. Because I have a lot of lives I have to make up for, the lives I have taken, and because it's right. That's why I fight. Because the soldiers with wounds you can't see.
Where John Campbell, a representative in Orange County, had a hometown meeting, and I asked him, I said, why did you vote against the last Veterans Benefits Bill? And he said, because veterans commit fraud. And I'm going, what the hell is wrong with you? And there's a veteran over there with 100% PTSD from Vietnam, and he's so angry he has to walk away because he can't control his anger. And I'm remembering when I went to the VA and such a hard time right after Vietnam that I had headaches and nightmares, and they said, there's nothing wrong with you. You had a headache before you went to Vietnam. It just happened that it's just a pre-existing condition.
Many of us who have been touched by war have committed our lives to ending the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and all war. It is wonderful how many have worked so hard to reduce availability of soldiers through counter-recruiting, lobbying Congress to defund wars. It's wonderful how many have worked to support the GI resistance in the military and have worked to support the resistors who have refused to serve a war because of conscience. It's wonderful all those who have worked to create a Department of Peace, and all those who have worked to prosecute those who violate our Constitution and commit war crimes.
When I got out of the Marines, I received my Bachelor's of Science in Political Science at Illinois State University. I went on to study at Vanderbilt and Princeton, receiving a Master's in Theology. And I finished over here at Fuller Seminary in the United States, where we thought it was acceptable for what was taking place in the foreign countries. How did we ever get conditioned to think that what was going on was okay?
I have the wisdom of gray hair on my head like some of the audience does. I appreciate you people out there. But you know, we've had time to think about it, and the system isn't working. And we need to change it, and we can't just sit on our butts at home watching TV. We have to get out there and change it. Thank you very much.
and narrated by Martin Sheen.
Boy, this is going to shock a lot of people.